All right, this witness has been placed under oath. I'll ask again, maybe some direction here before I inquire, Mr. Wixom. Would this witness be subject to the court's exclusionary order? Could you use the microphone, Mr. Wixom?
Certainly, I'm sorry. Judge, we obviously will defer to the court, but she is the wife of Matt Daybell, who is a brother-in-law to Tammy Daybell. So an in-law, I think, is within the statute as a victim. I don't know how the court has ruled on an in-law of an in-law.
Yeah, I do actually want to have a quick sidebar just to map the issue out quickly before I make a snap decision here. So we'll take a quick recess while you wait just a moment.
Okay.
All right, thanks, counsel. On the sidebar, we discussed the court's exclusionary order. There's a Idaho case called Shackelford that helps distinguish who that applies to and who doesn't, and the court determines it would not be applicable to this witness. So for that reason, I won't inquire. Thanks for the time, counsel, and working through that. So, Mr. Wixom, if you'd like to inquire on direct, you may.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ma'am, will you please state and spell your full name for the record?
Heather Daybell, HeatherDaybell.
Thank you. And ma'am, for the court and the jury's sake, you recently had some kind of an injury, is that correct?
I had a surgery. I had some artificial disc put in my cervical spine, so my throat's a little scratchy and my neck's in some pain, but
And my understanding is you might require some breaks during your testimony for that reason.
yes.
So I might invite you, as you feel like you need a break, please alert the court, and then the court will decide if and when to take a break.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Ma'am, you're related to Chad Daybell.
I am. He's my brother-in-law.
Okay. And who are you married to?
His younger brother, Matt,
And may I ask, how long have you been married?
will be married 30 years this winter, but we started dating 35 years ago.
Would it be safe to say then you've been acquainted with and known Chad for roughly 35 years?
He was actually on his mission when Matt and I started dating, but I was still in high school and he came home.
Oh, more than 30 years?
Yeah,
Right.
30 years.
Was there ever a time since you've been married to Matt that you and Chad and Tammy had lived in the same town?
When Matt and I first got married, we lived in Springville where Chad and Tammy were for a short time.
About how long, the best you could recall?
Maybe that first year, I remember helping them move up to Ogden. I'm not exactly sure. It was early on in Matt and I's marriage.
And then was there any other time subsequent to that you and Chad lived in the same town?
Yes, when they moved to Rexburg in 2015.
So in between the time that they moved to Ogden and the time that they moved to Rexburg, how did you interact with them at family occasions and whatnot?
Yeah, when we'd get together, we'd talk with Tammy and Chad and their kids. Yeah.
Was that something that happened frequently, infrequently?
Probably several times a year. We'd get back to Springville. Not a lot, but we would several times a year.
From your perspective, was it a normal amount of contact?
I would say so, yeah.
I want to just stop now and ask, how would you describe the nature of your relationship with Chad?
In the beginning, when Matt and I first were married, it was normal as any in-law relationship would be. And then, like I said, we moved away. We didn't live close, but when we'd get together, we would talk mainly about his books. That seemed to be the topic most of the time of conversation, but I would say cordial and nothing out of the ordinary.
At any point, did the nature of your relationship with him change?
It did, yes.
When did it change?
2014, when he started talking about end of times events and discussing a book that he had published for Julie Rowe.
We'll come back to that, but how did this relationship change at that point?
I was concerned about the things that he was telling the family and telling Matt and I. I was not comfortable with what he was informing us with.
Will you please elaborate to the jury what were the things that Chad was saying or teaching you that caused you the concerns?
He indicated that there would be an earthquake that would be happening in 2015, and he was kind of making us aware and preparing us for all of these end times events that were going to happen and cause a lot of destruction in Utah, in particular Salt Lake area.
Did he explain to you why he believed those events would occur?
Those were events that Julie Rowe had seen in a near-death experience. And so he had talked about those things with her as he published her book. And then he indicated he was seeing those things in vision as well.
So Chad is someone who had expressed to you and your family these visions that he had had?
That he could see beyond the veil and see future events.
Were there other things that he explained to you that caused you concern, other teachings in addition to that?
At that point, it was mainly that. It was just these end of times events and when they would happen.
Later, were there other teachings or things that he would say to you or your family that caused you concern?
When he informed us he was thinking of moving his family to Rexburg in 2014, or 15, whenever that was, it started, we actually had a conversation with him, asking him exactly what it was he thought was going to happen. And we had a pretty detailed conversation.
I'd like to pause you there. To the best you can recall, can you tell the jury when did that conversation occur?
That conversation was when they came out, Chad, Tammy, and some of their children came out to Rexburg to look for homes. And Matt and I sat with Chad in our home. That would have been summertime 2015.
And what happened in that conversation?
It was, excuse me, it was asking him point blank to give us the details of why he felt he needed to make this move. And he indicated that, and in particular, the houses that he was looking at were very close to our home. And we had some concerns with that. He told my husband and I that we would become great leaders in this gathering of people that would happen because of all the destruction in Utah, that our land where we lived would help in that, and that our home would become like a church or a temple. He was telling us those kinds of things. And that he felt like he needed to be in Rexburg with his family because the headquarters in Salt Lake of the church would end up having to move to Rexburg when all this destruction happened.
Did he ever explain to you whether he had seen or believed that he would have any kind of a significant role in this?
Mainly just that he would be helping in this gathering of people with their tents and everything, that he would be helping in that cause.
So based on what he was telling you, did he perceive his need to move to Rexburg to be something he could do to fulfill his role?
Yes, that he had a part to play in that. Mm-hmm.
Did you believe these visions or teachings at the time that Chad was sharing?
No, I did not.
Then help the jury understand, why was that a concern to you? If you didn't believe them, why was it concerning?
Because he had let us know he was intending, he was going to let people be knowing of this with Julie Rowe's book, and trying to prepare people as all this destruction happened, that's why he was coming, and that he felt that we were going to be helping in that cause.
So further, if you don't believe them, why was there a concern that you had that he would be telling everybody about this?
Because in the belief system I had at that time in the LDS church, just some average person doesn't get information specific like that to share with others. In my belief at the time, we had a prophet of the church that would let us know if we needed to do anything to prepare for something like that. So in my understanding and how I had been taught, it wouldn't come through someone like Chad.
So let me ask you this way. If you didn't believe these things, why do you need to care about it if he's out teaching this stuff to people?
Because my opinion was that was incorrect, and that he was spreading that around to other church members. And that's, as I was taught, you don't do that.
Okay. So during this conversation that you were referring to in your home, did you ever confront Chad or tell him that you don't believe these things?
I did. I told him that I wasn't feeling good about what he was saying, and that I did. I was very blunt. I just flat out said, I don't believe what you're saying.
What was his reaction to you?
Chad doesn't show a lot of reaction, so it was just, okay. That was about it. He didn't argue or anything like that.
Did you express concerns about whether or not he should move near you?
Yes, Matt and I both did that. We decided years and years ago that we wanted to live apart from family. We do better that way as a couple, and had made a home for ourselves in Rexburg. We'd been in the area 15 years at that point. And we did express to him as he was looking at homes near us, that if he needed to move to Rexburg, that was fine. Please just move somewhere not right in our neighborhood and not in our ward.
Why was it important to you that he not move in your neighborhood and ward?
Because I knew why he was coming, and I didn't want him trying to draw in people from my ward, and having people associate his close proximity to us that we were involved or agreed with him.
Would it be fair to say, were there reputational concerns for you and your family?
We've built a business in Rexburg. We've made a good name for ourselves and didn't want there to be issues because of what Chad was coming with.
How did the conversation end?
We had gone and looked at homes. The conversation at that point, they said they didn't find a home that they liked. And so they just kind of put it all on pause, asked if they could store their stuff in a shed or something at our house in case they needed to quickly come to Rexburg. They'd have some supplies there. We told them they could do that. So when they left from that trip, we were under the impression that they wouldn't be moving soon.
Excuse me. So having explained all this at that point, how would you then describe your relationship with Chad at that point?
I was relieved at that point, so I kind of didn't worry about it because he indicated they wouldn't be coming. So, but to me, it felt, I don't know if I'd even say, well, it was strained. It was strained at that point. I was struggling.
How was it strained? Could you explain that?
Again, it was just my concerns with his trying to convince his family and others that these events were going to happen. And so as he wasn't going to let up on that he was quite certain. We asked him, is this happening? And he said, this is happening. And so,
May I interrupt you?
mhm,
What do you mean by this is happening?
all of these events, the earthquake and everything, that those things were happening in 2015.
Did you later learn that he and Tammy did have immediate plans to move to Rexburg?
It was shortly after that. I can't remember for sure. It was about a week or two. We did get a phone call that they had put an offer on the home that they bought and that they were moving.
And approximately when did that happen?
That would be summer 2015. I can't remember exactly if it was July, August. I don't remember for sure.
When you found out about that, what was your reaction? What did you do?
I cried. I was very upset. Asked my husband to please talk him out of it, but the home was already in process of being bought at that point. So there wasn't anything that I could do about it.
And we'll come back to that for a moment. Can you please explain to the jury what at the time that Chad started having these visions and sharing them in 2014 or 15, what was your relationship like with Tammy?
About the same. We were cordial and friendly, and when we'd see each other at family events, we would visit and just normal.
Did that ever change?
Once they moved to Rexburg, because she knew we weren't happy about that move, we talked and things as they moved, and I tried to do a few things to help her. So I wouldn't say off the bat that it was strained with Tammy. That progressed as time went on.
And likewise, to go back on something you mentioned, I think you said Chad was teaching these things to his own family.
That's the understanding I had, yeah.
Did you ever get any sense of whether or not his wife and children were believing these things?
In a conversation I had with Chad and Tammy, it was Chad that indicated that he would come home with these visions and he'd say new things, and she'd kind of look at him and roll her eyes, but then she would go pray on it and get an answer that he was right. So especially concerning the move to Rexburg, she indicated that's how that went, is that he would come home with things, should be
Sustain.
Did you get any of this information from Chad or was it just from Tammy?
Well, the information of him receiving visions and bringing it to her and her kind of rolling her eyes, that was from Chad. He said that to me.
Okay. Did he explain that Tammy would ever change her mind?
I don't recall him saying she'd change her mind. I don't recall that.
Just based upon your interaction then, did you ever come to believe that Tammy was accepting of his visions?
I took it, yes, that she was. After some time, if it was something that seemed off to her, strange, she'd pray about it and then get a confirmation.
It's an objection, I suppose, based on hearsay, so that's sustained.
So, ma'am, with respect to the children, did you ever have any, based on observations and interactions, not what they may have said, did you ever come to get a feel or believe whether or not they were accepting of their father's visions?
From my observation, yes, they all believed his visions.
Did that appear to be true with all the children?
Yes.
Was there ever a time that Chad tried to engage your children and explain these visions to them?
Yes, my second child, my oldest son, came to Matt and I. This would have been 2014-ish, maybe. Chad had approached him and told him that he would be a leader in this.
This is Mr. Wixom, response to that objection, please.
Judge, really, it's just going to state of mind, not to any truth of any visions, just simply how it was impacting her son, whether he believed these things. It's under 8033.
It's objection is overruled. On a hearsay objection, it's overruled, so you can continue.
Thank you. You may answer.
So he just came to us. He was uncomfortable that Chad had approached him. And so in a later conversation, I did confront Chad on that and asked him not to approach my children.
How did Chad react to that confrontation?
Same way. Okay.
Was there ever a time that you had any confrontations with Chad in your backyard?
We had, once they had moved to Rexburg, so again, summer of 2015, shortly after that, I was concerned for Tammy and wanted to know how she was doing. So we asked Chad and Tammy to come over and have a visit with us. And he indicated that that would be fine, but to direct our questions or whatever we wanted to say at Chad and not at Tammy, because she would get upset at us if we directed anything at her.
Had you had any history prior to that with Tammy getting upset with you about anything?
No.
And to be clear, it was Chad who gave you this instruction?
Yes.
So in that conversation, did you follow Chad's instruction to only talk to him, or did you talk directly to Tammy?
I did not follow that instruction. Tammy was a grown woman, so I directed my questions at her.
Had you prior to that or since then, ever seen any other behavior that may have caused you concern between Chad and Tammy?
No, they seemed like a happy couple.
Before or since that, did Chad ever try to stop Tammy from talking or others from talking directly to her?
Not that I'm aware of.
So that was the only incident?
Mm-hmm.
How did he react when you continued to address Tammy?
Pretty typical. He didn't react. We just had a conversation. He didn't seem upset or anything that I was talking directly to her.
What was the result of that conversation with Chad and Tammy?
My main intent for that conversation was to ask if Tammy was doing okay with the move, because I knew she was initially not wanting to move to Rexburg. And she again said she had prayed about it and felt like it was a good thing for their family. So said, okay. And then talked a little bit further with Chad about his visions and things. And I again said, I don't have any confirmation in myself that any of that's true or going to happen.
Did you get any indication from Chad's responses or reactions to you rejecting his beliefs? Did that affect him in any way that you could tell?
No, there's usually very little reaction. So it was just kind of nods and that was it.
So how long after that was it that they'd actually moved into your
To
neighborhood?
me, it seems like weeks. It was pretty recently after they moved. I don't remember exactly, summer of 2015.
How far away was their home from yours?
It's about a half a mile. You just go to the end of our street and turn onto Salem Highway, and they're about a half a mile down the street.
Can you see each other's homes from standing outside? Do you have that vantage point?
No, you'd have to go to the highway to see their house because there's a bend. So not directly from my house, but once you turn onto the highway, it's right there.
But if you wanted to walk, you're estimating a half of a mile.
Mhm.
Is that a yes for the record?
Yes, I've actually timed that because I walk that road. So it's a half a mile.
And once they actually moved there, did you have regular interaction? Did you ever go to the home?
I went, when they initially moved, I went once or twice. I took Tammy some bread. I called her, gave her some suggestions of doctors and dentists and things like that. I remember going to watch Emma speak in church. Leah had a homecoming thing. I tried to support their kids where I could. So I was in their home a few times initially.
Would it be safe to say that you were in their home enough that if I showed you some photographs that you'd be able to recognize those photographs of their home?
Yeah.
Your Honor, at this time, I have what is marked as the state's proposed exhibits 420D. They are not stipulated. I'd like to offer those and ask that they be handed to the witness. I've got 2 copies for the court, one for the defense, if I may.
I'll take a look at them. Thank you.
Okay, proceed, Your Honor.
You may.
Thank you.
He hasn't moved to admit yet.
Thank you. Ma'am, may I ask you to please look at the first picture that you have in your hand in front of you?
Yes.
Briefly, can you just describe for the record what you're looking at?
This is the back of Chad's house. And I'm looking at in the forefront is an add-on to the original home that the kids would refer to as the cozy cone.
And may I ask, do you recognize that clearly as Chad's house?
Yes, I do.
If you were standing from the vantage point of that camera, would this accurately reflect a depiction of Chad's house?
Yes, it does.
You know, well, can I ask you to please turn to the next photograph? And please look at the back of the first one. And for the record, just note what the number is on the back, please.
Back of the first one, 420A.
Thank you. Now, as to the second photograph, why don't we start by referencing the number on the back of that, please?
This is 420B.
And on 420B, what do you see in that photograph?
Some musical instruments.
Where are the musical instruments at?
It appears to me up in.
Yeah, at this point, for just foundation, Mr. Rickson, we need to determine if these are coming in before we get testimony off of what they're showing.
Certainly. Ma'am, without referencing them, we just take a quick look at the other 2 photographs attached.
Okay.
Again, without going into what they are, do you recognize those photographs?
Yes, I do.
And have you seen the rooms depicted in those photographs?
Yes.
Have you been in them before?
Yes.
Do they accurately depict the inside of Chad's home?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, we would move to admit states 420A through D.
Any objection? All right, and please turn your microphone on, Mr. Pryor.
Thank you, Judge. Ms. Daybell, the first picture shows a musical set. Do you know whose musical set that is?
I can only assume. I don't know for sure.
So you've never seen that musical set in that room before, is that right?
I have seen musical instruments up in that room shortly after they moved in.
Okay, but did you see this musical set in that room? And did you actually see this picture?
I've never seen this picture until now.
Okay. Let's go to the next picture. Did you ever see that picture?
I have not seen this picture before.
Let's go to the third picture. Have you ever seen the third picture?
No, I haven't.
So what you are familiar with is, you described it as an add-on. Is that correct?
Yes.
This isn't part of the structure. It's attached to the garage. Is that correct?
Yes, my understanding is this cozy cone add-on it is attached to the garage. It was added to the garage.
The back of the garage.
Yes.
Okay. So it's not part of the original structure of the home where to your knowledge, where the members of that household live, slept, and eat. Is that correct?
Judge, at this time, I'd object. This is going outside the purpose of a voir dire and aid.
Judge, I'm going to object to the admission of these exhibits.
Right, response from the state. Some just on admissibility, not on what they're showing.
Your Honor, at this time, this witness has indicated through testimony that she has been in this home more than once. She's already looked at the photos. She can recognize the photos. She said that they accurately depict what is contained in the photos, and I believe that sufficient foundation has been laid.
All right, the court's considered the objection. I am going to sustain the objection as it relates to exhibits B, C, and D. However, on exhibit A, I think adequate foundation was laid. So exhibit A is going to be admitted. The other three, the objection is sustained based on the testimony of the witness in the voir dire native objection.
Your Honor, at this time, may I request to have exhibit 420A handed to me?
Yes.
Thank you. Your Honor, may I have permission to publish this to the jury at this time?
Yes, you may.
Yeah, I'd like to do that via the Elmo. Ma'am, I'd like you to go ahead and take a look at that screen, please. What do you see?
The back of Chad's home.
You've used the term cozy cove. Am I saying that right?
Cozy cone is how I understood it from his kids. Yeah.
And what does that mean, cozy cone?
From my understanding, it was referencing the cones in Cars Land, Disneyland movie. They had cones they called cozy cones. That was my understanding. It was kind of their nickname for that part of the house.
And have there been occasions where you've been in the house and you've either been in or seen inside the cozy cone?
Yes.
So you're familiar with that?
Yes.
Could you describe what that cozy cone is, what the room's like, what it is?
From the time I went in it was again, shortly after they moved in, you go through the house, there's the garage and everything. It's towards the back. You turn and you go up some stairs to get to the upper room of that cozy cone.
Have you ever had opportunity to make observation of what that room is used for?
At that time, my understanding, it was all those instruments were Chad's son Mark's, that he's a musician, and that's where he was keeping his instruments.
Based on personal knowledge only, what you know or don't know, did you ever have any other understanding of what that room may have been used for?
It was my understanding that once Garth moved to Rexburg, that was his room up there. That's what I was told.
Are you aware of any other purposes for that room?
No.
And I think you said you had to go up some stairs to access it?
You do, yes.
Were you familiar with where Tammy and Chad's bedroom were in that home?
Yeah, you'd go through the front door. They had a front living room, then just a hallway, and there were some bedrooms. I'm not exactly sure which bedroom was theirs, but their bedroom was down in the main part of the home.
So if you want to leave their bedroom and go to the cozy cone or vice versa, you'd have to go up or down some stairs?
Yes, you would.
Ma'am, Sorry, Your Honor, I finished this exhibit.
All right, thank you.
Ma'am, going back to this meeting that you had with Chad right before they actually moved, reference to that time, it was in 2015, you said?
Mhm.
Is that a yes?
Yes.
Thank you. Were there any other interactions that you had with Chad and Tammy between that time and the time that Tammy passed?
Yeah, we would see them because they had moved into our neighborhood and our ward. They were in our ward at church. So I would see them typically once a week at church on Sunday.
And did you have interactions with him in the normal course at church?
I tried not to. So, but if I saw Tammy or the kids, I'd say hi and stop and see how they're doing.
Why were you trying not to?
Because I was upset at Chad for having moved his family into our ward when we specifically asked him not to do that.
I want to draw your attention now back to October of 2019. Do you recall learning of Tammy's death?
Yes, I do.
And where were you and how did you learn of her death?
Matt and I were at a work conference in Las Vegas and we're in our hotel room the morning of October 19th when Matt got a phone call from his parents letting him know that Tammy had passed away. And they didn't know much, but they would call us when they had more information, but just letting us know she had passed.
How did you react to that information and that phone call?
Was very upset.
Other than just grief, was there anything else causing you to be upset?
Just not knowing what happened, having no information, and just she couldn't understand what would have happened.
So what did you do in reaction to that being upset?
I called Chad myself.
When did you call him?
It would have been, I'm not sure, around maybe 9 or 10 in the morning. Matt had left for his conference. Chad picked up and I expressed my condolences and shock at hearing that Tammy had passed. And I just asked him what happened to her.
Would that have been 9 or 10 in the morning the same day?
Yes, on October 19th.
And can you please tell the jury how that call went? What did you first say and how did Chad respond?
So just expressing my sympathy and shock that Tammy had passed away, and asked him what had happened, if he could explain to me what had happened.
What did he say?
He said that Tammy had not been feeling well, that she, about 10 o'clock at night, started coughing pretty hard and then got to sleep. And then about midnight, she started coughing again hard enough that she vomited, got her settled down. And then he said at 6 in the morning, he'd slept from midnight to 6 in the morning, and woke up because the sheet that was on him had come off of him and he heard a thud, and that woke him up. And he went to the other side of the bed and saw that Tammy had fallen off the bed, and he described her as she had died. She had been gone for a little while because she was hard. And so he called to Tammy or to Garth to come in and help him get Tammy back on the bed.
How did you react to that explanation of things?
But the whole time he was explaining that, it felt scripted to me, he was reading it or something. It just felt very scripted. That was the word that came to my mind, and it made me feel very uneasy.
Did you say anything to him about that scripted feeling or anything else?
I did not. I asked him if he was going to have an autopsy done to find out why she had passed, and he said no, that a coroner had come and looked at Tammy and could clearly see that there was matter in her throat that she that that's why she had died, is she had coughed hard and thrown up, and that had caused her death. So there was no need for an autopsy.
And that was Chad's explanation to you. Sorry.
Yes, it was.
What else did you talk about in that conversation?
He informed me that the funeral would be in 2 days. And I said, well, Matt and I aren't even home. We're in Las Vegas. Can you wait so we can get home? Matt had another brother that was out of town as well, and just said, can you wait till we can all get home to be to the funeral? And he said, no, we're just going to get it done.
Did you say any follow-up in that conversation about that?
I said, okay, we will buzz back and get to the funeral.
And in fact, did you do that? Did you attend the funeral?
We did, yes.
And where was the funeral at?
The funeral was in Springville, Utah.
What observations did you make, if any, at the funeral?
The main thing I remember, the program was just Chad and his children. The bishop spoke at the end. And the thing that stuck out was the opening song was "Put Your Shoulder to the Wheel." I have never heard that song used at a funeral. So that seemed strange to me.
Related to that, at the time, were you serving a calling in the LDS Church?
I was, yeah.
What was that calling you had?
A Stake Relief Society president.
Having had that calling, were funeral plans something you were familiar with?
Yes.
So you were familiar with typical LDS culture and how they might proceed with a funeral?
Yes.
Okay. Why was it so unusual to pick that song, "Put Your Shoulder to the Wheel"?
Because that song is describing, put your shoulder to the wheel, push along, do your duty with a heart full of song. It's about working. It's just about work. So that was strange to me at a funeral.
Okay. Anything else that you observed at the funeral that concerned you or you thought may have been unusual?
Just watching Chad as he spoke, and maybe it's just the way that he cries, but it seemed like he'd turn it on and turn it off and turn it on and turn it off, the crying. So it, to me, came across as kind of disingenuous.
Anything else?
No.
And had you attended the viewing the night before?
That I remember attending a viewing. I believe it was that morning. I'm not exactly sure on that, but I did attend a viewing, yes.
Thank you. Did you notice anything unusual at the viewing or concerning?
Kind of just observing Chad and his children. Again, it was strange to me that Chad could be smiling and seeing people and smiling and seemed to be doing well, and then crying all of a sudden. And it was a strange, his demeanor seemed strange to me.
Later, was there any kind of a luncheon that you attended?
Yeah, after the service, there was a luncheon. We all got there and Chad was late. That's what I remember from the luncheon, is that we weren't sure where Chad was.
Why did his lateness stand out to you?
Because it's his own wife's luncheon for her funeral. So I assumed he would be there with everyone else.
Do you recall how late he was?
I don't recall how late he was. I just remember that his brother-in-law, Jason, stood up and said, we're just going to get started. Chad's not here yet, but we're going to get started.
When Chad did arrive, did you observe anything about his demeanor or behavior there?
Yeah, it just seemed like a normal day. Like I wouldn't have guessed that he had just days previous lost his wife. He just didn't seem upset.
At that point, at that luncheon or later, did you have any further conversation with Chad about how Tammy had died?
Not at that point.
Did you at some point?
Yes, a few weeks later.
Can you explain first, when did that interaction occur and how did it occur? Was it in person, on the phone, those things?
It was on the phone.
About how long after the luncheon?
That would have been, I think, around in the middle of November. So 3 to 4 weeks after the funeral.
Why were you speaking to Chad on the phone for that occasion?
I had received a phone call from a member of our ward, Alice Gilbert.
Sustained.
Excluding any statements from other people besides Chad, why were you talking to Chad that day?
Because I had learned that he had gotten remarried and that his children were struggling and upset. So I reached out in a group text to his children and let them know that I was there for them if they needed me, that they were upset. And that resulted in Chad calling me.
And please explain to the jury how the conversation went between you and Chad at that point.
I answered, he said, "This is Chad." And he was upset with me and told me I had been a problem for him his whole life. And I asked him, "Who is this person you've married?" And he explained her name was Lori. Would I like to meet her? And I said, no, I would not. And then I asked him what happened to Tammy. And he said she died of a pulmonary embolism because she had gained 40 pounds.
Now, earlier you've testified that you were seeing Tammy at least in church every week.
Yes.
Had you observed a 40-pound weight gain in Tammy?
I don't generally keep track of people's weight gain or loss, but I had not noticed a big increase in weight gain on Tammy, no.
How did you react to that when he gave that explanation?
I remember being so flustered by that explanation because he had given me a different one weeks before that I was just upset, and he indicated to me, "I'm going to be living in Hawaii, so you don't have to worry about me anymore." And that was the end of the conversation.
Did you challenge him on the different explanations in that phone call?
I don't remember challenging him because I was so shocked by that I didn't challenge him on that.
Besides the different explanations as to Tammy's death, was there anything else that was shocking you in that conversation?
Just expressing to him, how can you get married this quickly after your wife has just passed away?
Did he give an answer to that?
He said that he'd met her about a year before, so he'd known her, and that she had lost a husband to a heart attack. And it just was, they were there for each other, and it just worked out that they'd get married.
You mentioned that one of the first things he said in the phone call was to the effect of, "You've been a problem for me my whole life."
Yes.
What did you take that to mean?
I said to him, "Your whole life?" I didn't understand what I had done to him his whole life, that he would consider me a problem.
Did he explain?
No.
And at that point, why was it that you told him that you didn't want to meet Lori?
Because I was upset that he had remarried weeks after Tammy's sudden passing. It seemed almost cruel for his children.
Anything else of note that you can remember that occurred in that conversation?
He did call me a pot stirrer. I remember that as well. Other than that, I think that's it.